Hi everyone, and welcome to the Real Estate Joint Venture Club. It's a pleasure to have you here today. My name's Odin. I'm going to be your host for today. So first, before we start, we're going to play our important disclaimer. So we're going to start that off. This publication or any seminars given here related hereto is sold or otherwise provided on the understanding that me, the author, or anyone from the Real Estate JV Club or its presenters, as the case may be, are not representing anything or responsible for anything that you're going to see here. You have to go and talk to your advisors and your professionals. I'm not an accountant. We're not liable for anything. So, you know, the basic disclaimer. I'll give you a couple seconds to read that. You can just pause it and read it. But let's get going. Let's get on with the presentation for today. So in the last number of presentations, and so far we've had approximately 5, what we've done is we've gone through the part 1 of the video, joint venture presentation as an introduction. Then we went through a couple of agreements. Then on part 3, we've gone through a couple of other agreements, memorandum of understanding, and so on. In part 4, we showed you what the general package looked like. And then in part 5, I started to show you one of the earlier joint ventures that I used in my purchasing of properties with joint venture partners. This particular presentation, I'm going to show you the next joint venture agreement that I've used, and here it is. This is the joint venture presentation that I used. And these are all real agreements, and I used this back in 2012, and typically when I use them, I update the dates and the names and so on. So this is just a general idea, because what's going to be happening as I go on with this, I'm going to be presenting you with real agreements and real opportunities for you, for me to assign, and for you to assign a portion of your joint venture so that you can make your joint venture a little more liquid and still own your property. The people that are going to get involved, they're going to get a great deal, ideally, as well. So we're going to be going through a number of these agreements, and they're a little bit different, each and every single one. So in this one here, we're just going to go through it step by step. Typically, when I have someone I'm going to be doing a joint venture with, we spend about 2 to 3 hours going through one of these agreements. And the idea with these presentations is to give you an idea of what a joint venture looks like, the body of the joint venture, and the basic understanding, so when we do a deal together, you're going to be prepared. So the investor has agreed to purchase the property pursuant to the contract. So there's a contract for purchase and sale, and here we're saying that the investor, so the investor is typically an individual with money or with credit, or sometimes money and credit. Co-owner, partner A, has agreed to contribute monies to assist in the acquisition of the property. So the investor would be B, and co-owner would be A in this particular case. And this is the beginning of what how profit sharing worked. And I spent a number of hours with a real estate lawyer working out the details and understanding exactly what this agreement was all about. So I'm going to give you, I paid about $2,500 for this particular agreement. I've used it a number of times. And it's important for you to understand, obviously, what it says. So the co-owners wish to enter into agreement as set forth with their respective rights and obligations and in respect to owning the property. So this is the interpretation, definitions, the laws where it's governing, so which province it's in, severability, and then we have included words, headings, cross-reference, accounting terminology, and schedules. So the schedules are the definitions, which we've already gone through, the declaration of trust, which is in the Schedule B, life insurance policies, valuations, contracts, and tenancy agreements. So this is what's going to be important in this particular joint venture agreement. I'm going to be going through a couple more joint venture agreements. You're going to have the privilege of being able to see what the differences are and which ones you can use. And it's been an evolutionary process for me. I didn't know a lot about joint ventures when I first started. I wanted to know, and as I've been going, I've been learning a lot about JVs and how they work. And the idea is that you have a couple of properties in your portfolio that are joint ventures, and you are going to know what the risks and rewards are. So the interpretations, here's the agreement, just kind of going through it, and as I'm going through it, you can read it as well. I'm going to get to the important parts. So the purpose of this agreement. The purpose of this agreement is to coordinate the ownership of the co-owners of their separate undivided interests in the property and to set forth the rights and obligations between the co-owners. So for greater certainty, it is understood that the activities of the co-owners herein will not require the acquisition by them as co-owners of any additional real estate property or interest therein unless the co-owners unanimously agree to do so. And typically you'd have another joint venture agreement or profit sharing agreement or co-owner agreement or whatever you want to call it. The co-owners acknowledge and agree that they have acquired the property as an investment, and each proposes to hold his respective interest in the property for an indefinite period of time as set forth herein. So as we know, real estate has its ups and its downs, and the idea is that we hold the property for enough time so that we can actually see a return in our investment. So the parties shall own the property and shall be entitled to the gains and income therefrom, and shall be responsible for the contributions of the property in proportion as set out herein. What's interesting about joint venture agreements is that you can have an addendum agreement and you can have an assignment agreement. So that you can always change a joint venture, you can always assign a joint venture. And this is really important to know. I didn't find that out until probably 2 or 3 years after I already had these, and I went to my lawyer and said, hey, we want to make some changes, what do we do? So what we did is we do an addendum agreement. And I do have those, and I'll be showing those as well as time goes on. So tenancy in common. It's showing what the tenancy in common is, that the property shall be owned beneficially by the co-owners as tenants in common, unless this agreement otherwise provides all revenues and benefits derived from and all obligations and liabilities incurred in respect of the property shall be shared by the co-owners on a basis of the venture percentage interest set forth for each of the co-owners in Schedule A here too. So I've been in situations where we have, as I just mentioned, we've had to make an addendum agreement. Something happens, someone's not able to pay or whatever it is, and I mean, the key with a joint venture agreement is that if someone's going through a tough time, you don't kick him to the curb. What you do is you lift them up, and these are part of the risks that we have to see in regards to joint ventures. People go through ups, people go through downs, and the joint venture is what's going to allow you to see how to manage your relationship. So the term of the agreement shall start on the effective date and shall continue until unless sooner terminated in accordance with the provisions of this agreement. So then we have trust. For any reason one of the parties is not shown on the legal title of the property as one of the legal owners, the party who is on title as the legal owner shall hold in trust for the other party and other parties' respective interests in the property as set forth herein. One of my early days, I was actually involved with a joint venture, and we didn't have a joint venture agreement. We just had an understanding. So this was my first lesson of making sure that you have an agreement. And what's interesting about this particular person is that he was a minister, and so I would have trusted a minister, of course. So what ended up happening is the guy went and refinanced the property without letting me know and took all of my portion of the property. And I didn't know, and I kind of got a little bit choked up on that. So we ended up selling the property, and the guy ended up not being able to pay the portion of the joint venture to me. I covered all my costs, but I made no revenues. And those are my early days. I have to say that you want to not make the mistakes I made in those early days, and that's how come I'm sharing this with you here. That the idea of this joint venture agreement, and you can see right here, is that it can be registered in trust. So each of the provinces have a different registration process. So depending on which province you're in, you're going to be talking to your legal advisor and the people that you work with, and you're going to ask, how do I register my joint venture? The registration in British Columbia is different than the registration in Alberta. For example, here, Caveat can only be registered for a finite amount of time in British Columbia, whereas in Alberta, Caveat can be registered for an infinite amount of time. So I wanted to make sure that, as I've done deals both in British Columbia and Alberta, and I've actually done deals across the country, that I wanted to make sure I understood what the registration process. I didn't want to get myself caught up again with that scenario. And I really do adhere to the agreement. It's an important part of the process to understand this is a very legal document, and there are repercussions if you don't follow the agreement. That's what you want. as a joint venture partner, you want to make sure that I can be held accountable, and I want to make sure that you can be held accountable as well. That's the ideal scenario. So in this particular case, if possible, any of the co-owners shall have the right to register the declaration of trust on the title to the property as the co-owners at the co-owner's expense. So I can go and I can register this on trust, and I have done that in a number of my properties. And depending on the province that you're in, the cost is very nominal, and it's worthwhile doing. And you can, sometimes I do it right away. There's been some cases where I didn't register anything on title, and I did trust the joint venture partner, and that joint venture partner saw me through the entire time and kept very good care of me, let me know everything that was happening, ended up being bought out, and it was a fantastic joint venture. So, I mean, you got to really see who you're working with, and you got to make sure that you have something that you're able to have registered. In my early days, again, that was the first mistake I made, and I never made that mistake again after that, just different ones. I didn't have this kind of joint venture agreement. Now I do. So again, I paid about $2,500 for this particular agreement. So acknowledgements. So this is just basically saying what acknowledgements there are, and then legal advice. Each party hereby acknowledges that he understands their respective rights and obligations under this agreement, has been advised that he or she should seek independent legal advice with respect to this agreement, and is signing the agreement voluntarily. So you haven't been forced or coerced or anything like this. So, I mean, then what I really liked about this particular agreement, this is a really good one, is that the mortgage. In British Columbia, when I found out that you can't actually register a caveat, or you can't register your interest on title, that you had to register a mortgage, it made me begin wondering, and I questioned it. Even the joint venture partner questioned it. Because what we did is we registered the mortgage in such a way that it reflected the 5-year potential maximum profit. So in one case, I had a $17,000 interest in the property, and the mortgage amount was for $75,000, and that was registered. And so on my assets, it has a mortgage for $75,000, even though the value of it is $17,500, because that was the potential maximum that the joint venture could be realized at, the maximum amount of profit that could be realized from that particular joint venture. In that particular case, that deal is now done. It's all been signed off. Everything is finished with that particular one, as the example I just gave. And again, that one worked out just wonderfully, and it was registered as a mortgage. So if the co-owner partner A is not registered on title of the property, and if co-owner partner A so elects, the investor shall execute a second mortgage, which may, at the sole opinion of co-owner A, be registered against the property as a subsequent charge to the mortgage. You're going to have to talk to your lawyer about that, and I do have the mortgage documents. I'll be able to show that sometime in the future, but the idea here is that you understand that I put in all the money. So when I'm putting in all the money, I wanted to make sure that my interest was secured, and so I secured it not only with a trust declaration and on title with a caveat, but I also want to make sure that I could have the option of getting it as a mortgage. Some of the things that I found out is that when I have a mortgage, it actually has more value if I'm going and getting financing compared to just a joint venture agreement. So there was a bunch of financing. I found out the rules of financing, and I wanted to make sure that I was financeable again in the future. So having a mortgage is a fantastic option for us when buying and even selling an interest in our joint venture. You can sell, you're going to sign the entire portion of the joint venture. And a number of my joint ventures, I put in $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, and the mortgage can be registered on there, of course, pursuant to the joint venture agreement, and your lawyer will know how to do that, or should, and if they don't, then maybe get a different lawyer. And then what you can do is you can sell that portion and you can make it liquid. Of course, you're going to give a good deal, and you're going to give, ideally, you're getting a good deal yourself, and that makes the joint venture even more worthwhile, this kind of agreement. And this is what I was interested in doing. So here's some of the management, the decisions. So the co-owners hereby create a position of financial manager appointed by in Schedule A. So who's going to be the financial manager? It could be a person or a corporation. Meeting of the co-owners. So again, this is just, it's outlining all the responsibilities of the co-owners. And then we have the financial manager. So what is the duties of the financial manager right here? So everything is laid out. What is every single thing? Remuneration of the financial manager, notices regarding conflicts. So you can see from the last joint venture agreement in the part number 5, this joint venture agreement is totally a step up. I think that one's probably about 17 or 18 pages, whereas this one is 36 pages. So it really, in the last joint venture, I realized that it wasn't really protecting me as much as I wanted. I went and saw another lawyer. The lawyer gave me a bunch of advice, and I decided with my joint venture partners that we would create this kind of agreement. And actually there's another kind of agreement that I'm going to be showing you. So it constantly evolved and went to the next level. So major decisions, who's making those? The scope of authority and indemnification. No party shall enter into any commitment binding upon the co-owners except for actions expressly provided in this agreement, actions expressly provided for by resolution, actions by the financial manager with the scope of his authority, and actions of the property manager with the scope of his authority. So major decisions, it's talking about major decisions. And then we go through financial matters. And again, this is a very quick taste, a very quick overview of the 36 pages in about 20 minutes. And I spend about 2 to 3 hours reading every single line with my joint venture partners and going through it so that you understand it. My idea has always been that if you're getting a $2,500 agreement, and the Word document of it no less, what you probably want to do if you're doing a deal with me is you probably want to use this again for yourself sometime in the future. So I created this in such a way that we could do that. Of course, there may be cash calls, and I have actually had cash calls. They are just a part of doing real estate. And so additional financial contributions are also there. And all of that is determined in the Schedule A. And we'll be looking at that in just a couple of minutes. There's shortfalls, leases, and the event of defaults, what happens in regards to defaults. Very important, because that's something we don't know what people are going through. Sometimes divorces happen, sometimes a bad business deal may happen, and so on. Ideally, we protect ourselves from that, but we want to make sure that you know what to do in case there's any kind of default. The sale of interest to fail the cure of a default, and some of the joint venture. And for myself, for instance, I would like to make sure that there is no default, and I want to hold the property as long as possible. That's the ideal scenario. So there's indemnity and an indemnification, transfer of ownership, right of first refusal, and all of this has to be followed. Compulsory buy and sell. And then what we have guarantees, indebtedness. I'm doing my best to keep this within time in case the sale of an event of a death, insurance, purchase and sale in case that happens. So you can see that we've pretty much what the price may be, life insurance, payment of delivery, accounting, and then what we do is we're getting to the bank accounts, allocation distributions, obligations, and you can see it's pretty involved. You can probably pause it and read it as you're going. It's going to take a little bit of research. But I want to just show you that there's so many different kinds of joint venture agreements. And ideally, what's going to happen is I'm going to be providing you an opportunity to do an assignment of one of these, and you're going to learn. We're going to go through it together, and you're going to get an interest. There's a lot of those educational forums out there that'll charge you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for weekend seminars, and you don't get to own a property. I'm of the opinion that, hey, if you got some money that you want to go and get education with, how about we work together and you get the education while at the same time getting interest in a property? To me, that makes a lot of sense. It's an asset that will appreciate over the next 20 to 25 years. When that's paid off to zero, guess what we have? And by the way, the renters are all renting them out. I'm thinking long-term real estate here, not short-term. So additional financial contributions, we have to determine what the percentages are. And all of my joint venture agreements have different percentages. They're not all the same. Everything is negotiated differently. We have effective dates, contracts. All of this is in schedule. We have the initial financial contribution, how much money was put in. And then what we have is we've got from money was put in here. So very often I would put in the bulk of the cash, and the investor or the co-owner, B, would put in make sure they pay their legal fees. It's important that you have your own real estate lawyer. We have rental percentage participation, mortgages, negative cash flow, what the percentages are, and then we just keep on going. If there's any kind of shortfalls, this was a deal that I had there. That deal no longer exists, so I kind of custom tailored every one of these. Declaration of trust is really important. This is basically saying that this person is keeping my money in trust if I'm not on title, and this is my legal document. So I had to understand what the legal process is, as well as understanding the joint venture agreement. Then we have life insurance policies. We have valuation of the property. And then of course, there's the other schedules, which would be the rental agreement. So I hope that gave you a little bit of an overview of the differences of joint venture agreements. I'm doing my best to keep these short and sweet for you, so that when the time comes for you to do a deal, you're going to have an idea of, okay, well, I've seen a joint venture before. He's kind of gone through a couple of them. Let's spend some time and see what kind of joint venture is that I'm getting involved with. So I look forward to having you come out to one of our next events. And let's go through a little bit of a commercial. So here's my disclaimer again. It's basically saying that make sure you go and get your own legal advice. It's really important. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Real Estate Joint Venture Club and what the membership includes. There's tons of topics right now. Right now, I'm in the process of sharing with you and educating you specifically on what joint ventures are. You don't have to do joint ventures. That's okay. Understanding the process of joint ventures is great. We talk a lot about buying and selling your property, how to build real estate build your real estate business, or any business as a matter of fact. How to do rent-own, seller financing, sandwich leases, down payment provided. How to get lower mortgages, and that's with mortgage brokers and banks and so on, talking to them. Basically anything to build your portfolio. So we're an all-around real estate club, and we work together. So we also talk about your financing binder. It's really important that I understand your financing binder if we're going to be doing a deal together, because I want to make sure that everything is going to be done well, and that everything that you and I know where each other is coming from. So we prepare your financing binder, and then when you prepare that, you go to your mortgage broker or your bank, and they're able to give you mortgages. But in the cases of the joint ventures, all the mortgages are already done. I'm looking to do an assignment. I'm looking to get a new partner in and to show you what this process is. So in that binder, it includes net worth statements, balance sheets, and that's all online. We have a ton of monthly webinars, and they're all being updated. A lot of them have been done a number of years ago, and now they're all being updated. So you can go on there and you can see what kind of webinars. There's just so much information. It's just so much information. We have 2 weeks, your next investment property, real estate scout, bird dog training, how to work with real estate agents, how to find great deals, how to find investors and JV partners, financing binder presentations, and there's the buy my next 12 no money down deals. How to buy a no money down deal in the next 12 months. Mastermind groups, we have deals that are done for you, and all of this is a series of preparing you for when the assignment agreement comes, so you can take action. You can actually say, okay, I'm ready to do a deal with this guy. So the special offer is that it's free, doesn't cost you anything. You sign up and we start educating and start learning about real estate. In my opinion, it's really important and we have a $9.99 option. Of course, I recommend the $9.99 option. There's some legal stuff on there that you definitely want to know about, and you get all the deals before anyone else. You get to take first options on those deals, and the deals, as long as no deals have ever gone to the free members. They've only ever gone to the paid members. So that kind of tells you where you're at, and lets me know where you're at as well. Now, if you want to put your hand up and say, hey, yeah, I'm ready to do a deal. I've got cash, I got credit, I want to find a deal with you. There's a special joint venture agreement that we can do where I find the property with you, we joint venture on it together. I can do the management, you can do the management, we can triangulate a joint venture. There's so much that we can do. It's just really, there are no limits. So thanks very much for listening to this, and I look forward to talking to you again in the future and doing a deal with you. Take care.